Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome once again to Fun, Fitness, and Food Fridays. For those of you who are just joined us, welcome. For those of you who've been hanging out with us at Sit and Fit and Zumba, woo, we made it. We made it. We are in our third session for the day, and I'm happy to welcome Mr. Malcolm McLean. He's from the Greater Newark Conservancy. He's going to be doing a class on Intro to Edible Gardening. But before I turn it over to him, I want to again welcome you on behalf of the Office of University and Community Partnerships, the AHLI team, who have put this together. We are excited. We are completing our week 3 of 5. Our enrollment continues to increase. We see you. We see your activity. We see you moving, and we see you taking in all of the lessons to be learned. After this, we will be back with you on Monday for Meditation, Motivation, and Music Monday. So we hope you can join us on Monday. As a reminder, registration is not required, but if you have registered, you can just join in by the link. At this time, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen and turn it over to my friend Malcolm, who will be guiding this session. Enjoy, good folks.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Yvette. So like Yvette mentioned, my name is Malcolm McLean, and I'm from Greater Newark Conservancy, where I am the Youth Internship Coordinator. So today I'm going to be speaking to you about edible gardening. So let me just share my screen with you. Hey, Yvette, could you grant me sharing privileges?
I sure can. 1 second.
Also, hope everybody's doing well with this whole pandemic situation. I know this is a difficult time. So the Conservancy likes to, or we're happy to be able to share information about edible gardening right now, because this is a great way that people can, stay active and do something that is, very useful and really easy to do. Let's see. We're not the record comments. Let's quit. So I'm gonna have to be right back with it in order to access the desktop. It's asking me to go out and come back in.
Okay. Well, okay. No problem. So while we wait for Malcolm, just wondering how many of you know how to use the chat feature where you can send some messages to us or ask some questions. It's located right there under participants, and you can ask questions like, how is your day going? Or what fruit is that? So I want you to take an opportunity to familiarize yourself and just send a message if you can so that we know that you are learning how to use these functions.
Yvette, so one more time, can you try to give me sharing privileges? Sure.
Yeah, 1 second.
All right, and here we are. Okay, sorry for the technical difficulties, but here we are with Intro to Edible Gardening. So like Yvette mentioned, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat and I'll respond when I get a chance. If you also are able to unmute yourself, feel free to interrupt me. But today we're going to be speaking about edible gardening and how easy it is for anybody to get started doing this. So, be willing to dive right in, ask any questions, and hopefully you can learn a lot and then be ready to start gardening at the end of this presentation. So like I said, my name is Malcolm McLean, and I'm with Greater Newark Conservancy. We're located in the central ward of Newark on Prince Street, so we're right off of Springfield Avenue across the street from ShopRite. that's on Springfield. So if you ever want to stop by, feel free. So before we get into it, I want to speak about why we would want to vegetable garden or garden edible plants or flowers and things like that. And there are two main reasons that I want to focus on today. So the first one is pretty self-explanatory, that we want to, have a vegetable garden so that we can grow our own food. So as opposed to going to the supermarket, right, if we have a garden that's right in our own backyard or on our windowsill, it's really easy to have year-round access to food just right in your home. You don't have to leave and go to the supermarket or anything like that. There are a lot of things that you're just able to grow right at home. And then, at that point it's free, so you don't even have to worry about going out and spending money. And then the other thing that's great is that it's just great to know how to grow your own food, right? So you become knowledgeable of the growing practices. So the things that you get from the supermarket, you know how it's grown. For example, what chemicals may be used on the food, and you may want to avoid using those chemicals when you're growing your own food. So knowledge is power. So being able to know what goes into growing the things that we put into our bodies every day in order to nourish ourselves and to keep ourselves alive is really important information and a really powerful tool in changing our lifestyles and leading as healthy lifestyles as possible. And the other major aspect of vegetable gardening that we like to highlight is that gardening just has very therapeutic benefits to it. So one of the great things is that you are able to do something that is very intentional, right? Like maybe you're planting a tomato plant or even a basil plant or mint. You planted it, you're able to watch it grow, you're able to nurture it, and then, you get the benefits of that. Right, so as opposed to other things that we may do where we don't see the end result of it, or that end result may not be something tangible to us, when you're vegetable gardening, you're able to actually literally taste the fruits of your labor when you're biting into that cucumber or biting into that tomato that you put time into, that you put effort into, and that you've, done the weeding, done the watering, all that great stuff. And then I'll just also add, with weeding in particular, a lot of gardeners always say that weeding is one of the most therapeutic things that you can do, right? After you've planted the seed in the ground, after you've watered it, the main thing that you have to do mostly is maintenance. So that's a lot of weeding, mostly weeding. There's a ton of weeding that's involved in gardening. If you are a gardener, feel free to put that into a chat so I can know who here is a gardener. If you're not a gardener, let me know that too so I can maybe coax you into gardening. But weeding as an act in particular is really great because it's kind of like a mindless activity. You're able to think a lot while you're doing it. And there are a lot of other benefits that you can get, right? So when you're weeding out your garden, you can think, I know I've thought this, like what are things in my life that are growing up next to the things that I like, but that I actually should be removing, right? It's very intentional. It's a very mindless process, but you can put a lot into it. So there are a lot of therapeutic benefits to gardening just by being able to, put yourself at ease, have something that you're actively working towards. It's something that's really low stakes because gardening isn't one of the most intensive, practices that we can do, right? There are things that are a lot more labor intensive. So with gardening, you're really just putting your hands in the dirt and then, growing your own food. So what are things that you can actually grow yourself as opposed to buying in the supermarket? And that's really everything. Anything that you can buy from the supermarket, you realistically can grow in your own backyard, either in the dirt, in a container, or on your windowsill. So this includes things like fruit, right, where you can grow strawberries, melons, cucumbers, tomatoes, staple fruits, in anybody's kitchen. You can grow different vegetables like salad greens, like lettuces and things like that, but also cooking greens like kale or collard greens, cabbages. We grow a lot of those things on our farm and on our site over there on the Food Country. You're also able to grow root vegetables. So those are potatoes, sweet potatoes, carrots, shallots, onions. And those things are great because those are things that will also last long into the wintertime. So all those root vegetables will actually store very well. You don't have to worry about them going bad or anything like that. So then when we get into the part of the year during the late fall and in the winter time and early spring, where we're not able to grow some of the fruits and vegetables, we are actually able to grow some things like sweet potatoes and other root vegetables that we can incorporate into our dishes that are going to be available to us year-round. And then kind of the focus of today is herbs that you're also able to grow. And these are things that are very low stakes and definitely things that you can grow in your windowsill if you don't have access to a growing space like a large backyard, or if you don't want to put containers around. You can grow things like mint, basil, rosemary, thyme, oregano. things that you use for cooking every day as seasonings, but it's really great that you can grow them in your own home as fresh herbs, and then you can even decide to dry them out if you wanted to, and then crush them so that you have a more seasoning that you may be used to when you're buying things from the grocery store that come in the regular seasoning packets. So today, I'm going to speak to you about 4 keys to edible gardening. And these are the things that you really only have to concern yourself with if you want to start a garden. And those things are water, light, soil, and growing space. And then once you've thought about all these things, once you develop a plan for how you're going to maintain all these things, essentially you've mastered the basics of gardening. And then all that's left for you to do is to jump right in and then to actually, do the practice of gardening. So I'm going to explain each of these things, not in too much depth because they are pretty much self-explanatory. So if you do have any questions, feel free to let me know. So the first thing that we want to keep in mind is watering. So we have a question with each of these things, kind of cute little questions to get you to think how you maintain your garden in relation to this specific key. So our first key is watering. So how you quench your food. So just like water is essential for our lives and our livelihoods, water is also essential for plant life. So in order for your garden to grow, you need to make sure that your garden, whether it's in your backyard, in a container, or in your home on a windowsill or in your kitchen, you need to make sure that your garden has consistent access to watering or to water. So either there's a spigot that you have in your backyard, or there's a sink that's right next to your garden, or right next to your windowsill that you're gardening on. And mostly the watering is what you're going to have to think about the most. So when you're thinking of garden placement, since you have to water every day, you just want to make sure that you're placing your garden in a place where you have easy access to water, right? So for example, if you are gardening in your backyard, you want to make sure that the only place that there's water available isn't inside the house or across the street in your neighbor's yard where they have a spigot, because it's going to become very tiring very quickly having to lug over watering cans every time you need to water your garden. And then especially during the summertime when it's really hot, you'll need to be watering a lot more frequently. So, just make sure that your water source is very close to your garden so that you're not, put off by gardening by the fact that you have to carry a watering can a large distance. So you're going to be sure not to overwater or underwater in the garden. And the easy way to do that is just to stick your hands in the dirt. The thing about gardening is that it's very interactive in terms of you need to, either with gloves or without gloves, you're going to be constantly in the dirt, either planting things in there, pulling out weeds, harvesting your crop. So with watering, you just need to get used to actually sticking your fingers in the soil and seeing, does it feel wet or does it feel dry? If that soil is still moist on the top couple inches, then you don't need to water. But if you're sticking your finger down deep and then it's bone dry, then that's how you know it is time to water your garden. So these, counts for both inside and outside. Just stick your finger in the dirt, and then you'll know if it's time to water or not. And these are also tips for house plants too. So these aren't just for your vegetables or your fruits. If you have a plant in your home and you're worried about, is it getting enough water? Is it not getting too much water? If you stick your hand in the dirt and the dirt is dry, then more likely than not, that it's time to water your plant. If it is still wet, then you want to hold off on watering because you really don't want to overwater the plant, because overwatering or underwatering are both two, bad things to get into. And, your frequency of watering will depend on the weather, right? So it's kind of gloomy, rainy outside. It rained today, rained yesterday, and the day before. So you won't really have to worry about watering your outside garden right now. If it's too hot, we had that heat wave at the beginning of the week. So then you'll want to water a lot more frequently, maybe a couple times a day, or maybe a few consecutive days because the soil will dry out. If it's cold, you may not be watering as frequently because the water won't be evaporating. So there are a lot of outside conditions that you have to take into account when you're deciding how you want to water. And like I said with the pro tip here, it's time to water by putting your fingers in the soil, right? So between paying attention to the conditions outside, what is the climate like for that day? How has the climate been that week? Between that and then sticking your fingers in the soil and seeing how wet the soil is, you'll know when it's actually time to water. So that's it for key number 1. Key number 2 is light. So where will you place your food or where will you place your garden so that it's getting the most amount of light that it needs to survive? So, unlike people, plants get their energy from the sun. So we want to make sure that your plants are getting just enough sun so that they're able to produce the leaves for our vegetables, like our greens, like collard greens, cabbage, where we harvest the leaves, and those are things that we eat, or from our vegetables that fruit. So those are things like tomatoes, cucumbers, other things that we harvest that aren't the leaves of the plant, but that are actually the fruiting bodies of the plant that we then ingest. So the typical rule of thumb is that we want our vegetables to get at least 6 to 8 hours of direct sunlight. So if you're gardening outside, it's pretty easy to tell, right? If you can go outside and, you have to see, is this spot in my garden getting at least 6 to 8 hours of sun during the day, either at the beginning part of the day, the middle, or the end of the day, just is it getting 6 to 8 hours of light? Or if you're gardening indoors, are you putting it next to a window that's getting 6 to 8 hours of light a day? Usually the rule of thumb that we have is that you want to garden in a south-facing window or have your garden south-facing. Essentially what that means is that when you're looking at your garden, you want to make sure that the south side of your garden is not being blocked by any buildings, right? So that sunlight can get in, because in the southern parts of our gardens, that's where we're able to get the most sunlight. That's where we're getting the direct sunlight. So just make sure that when you are gardening, that you're putting it in a place that doesn't get too much shade. A south-facing window is best, but you can also, garden with a north, west, or east-facing window. You just may need to move your plant so that it gets those 6 to 8 hours of direct light that it will need in order to keep producing and for you to harvest all the great things that you need in order to eat it. The next thing that you have to keep in mind is soil quality. So especially in areas like Newark, and then in other urban areas, we definitely recommend that you don't plant directly into the native soil of the ground if you are deciding to plant outside. The reason for this is that hopefully everybody knows we have this lead situation that's going on in our water. So with the lead situation that's happening in our water, the main source of lead is our pipes, so lead will leach to our pipes. But another major source of lead contamination is in our soils. And, that's another main way that people actually get lead into their bodies, by ingesting soils that are still on their fruits and their vegetables. So in urban areas, we are unfortunately more likely to have native soils that are more contaminated with lead. So in order to fight that, we either recommend that you get your soil tested, which you can do for free by sending it off to Rutgers University, which has an agricultural extension that will test your soil for free. But a safer bet, even if you do that, is to actually buy soil and then put new soil down on top of the native soil so that you're growing in that new soil. Or if you're using a container, just buying new soil that you're going to put into that container. So soil, like it says on the slide, is actually one of our most important natural resources, but unfortunately, it's not thought of like that, right? So when we think of natural resources, sometimes we think of water. We may think of other things like gasoline or food or things like that. But soil is actually one of the ones that are super important to us, because without healthy soils, we actually wouldn't have any of the food that we need to live. And then think of all the things that will be impacted in that chain, right? So we won't be able to be nourished. The animals that we use for our meats won't be able to be nourished, right? Our crops won't be able to grow and things like that. So soil is actually a very important resource that we need to make sure that we're maintaining. And we have to make sure that that soil has the vital nutrients in it that it needs in order to support the growth of healthy plant life. Like it says here, soils can be have too many nutrients, not enough nutrients. So if you're buying a soil, you can rest assured that it has those nutrients that you need. But then if you decide to keep planting in those soils, you may need to buy other soil amendments, like compost, or other things that will add nutrients back into the soil, like nitrogen, for example, or potassium. And these are things that we can speak about more in depth. If you have more questions, let me know. But we just need to make sure that our soils are healthy in terms of the nutrient levels that are in there, and also that they don't have any toxins or other chemicals that we don't want to put into our bodies, like lead, for example. And then, there are a lot of things that we can do in order to maintain healthy soils, like composting, for example. So what composting is essentially reusing any kitchen scraps that you may have, and then incorporating those back into your soils so that the nutrients that are in that banana peel, for example, that you aren't going to eat, or in those apple skins that you peeled off, right, instead of sending those things to garbage, to the landfill, instead, we can recycle those nutrients back into our soils so that we can continue to build healthy soils, and so that the foods that we will plant in those soils will continue to have the nutrients that we will then put back into our bodies. So composting is essentially recycling, and those help to build healthy soils that we would then use to then have healthy crops that will then lead to healthy bodies. So the final key that we speak about is growing space. So where will you grow your food, right? Are you going to grow it outside in your backyard? Are you going to grow it, right? So if you're outside, are you going to be in the dirt, right, in a raised bed? Are you going to choose to actually dig into the native soil? Or are you going to buy another container that you're going to plant your food in? Or are you going to garden on your windowsill or in some other container that's inside of your home? So I'll just read this slide here. So kind of similar to what I was saying before, decades of environmentally unfriendly practices have poisoned the rich earth beneath our feet, the soils. So one of the major considerations we have with gardening is the presence of heavy metals, especially lead and other toxins in our soil. So to make sure that you aren't growing in any contaminated soils, make sure to get your soil tested. And then even if you do get your soil tested, you may want to consider building an alternative place other than directly in the soil. So this can be a raised bed, either 4x4 or 4x8 or some other size, which can be built relatively cheaply. It could be a fun project that you do with your family. You can just get those scrap materials from Home Depot or from Lowe's or from some other gardening store. Or you can buy a container that can be adapted to your backyard. It's an apartment, a windowsill, and many other places. And just so you know, most things that you are able to actually plant in the ground, you can just move those things to a container. All you have to do is make sure that the container is deep enough for things like root vegetables. But for a lot of things like herbs and greens and things like that, you really don't need a large container. You can have something that's very small, and those things will produce enough food that you'll need for the week or for the next 2 weeks and things like that. So just going more into that, there are different spaces, growing spaces, right? We have outdoor spaces. So these are pictures that I took actually this morning from our site over on 32 Prince Street at the Conservancy. So the picture that's on the left is one of our vegetable beds. So if you look, the more colorful things in the middle, so we have the yellow and we have the red, those are Swiss chard that we grow. We also, on the left-hand side, are growing some, those are mustard greens. We have some eggplant that are growing in there. We also grow tomatoes on the site, peppers. If you look to the far right, you'll see some lettuce that's growing over there. You have some kale growing. So, you know, these are things that you can buy from the supermarket that people actually incorporate into their daily meals, and you're able to grow them in a small space just like this. If you look at the two pictures to the right, these are actually herbs that we grow. So that top picture is sage that we have growing at our site in our herb garden. It's growing kind of wild now, so that's why it's so bushy. But as you see here, right, once these things get established, they're pretty easy to maintain, and they will mostly maintain themselves, and they'll even get out of control if you let them, right? But what we use this for is we sell it at our farm stands that we have a few times a week. We may harvest it to use with other cooking programs that we do at the Conservancy, right? So it's really great for us to have an abundance. And if this is in a smaller container, right, then it would not grow so wild. And then at the bottom, that's just a picture of other herbs that we have here. So there we have some oregano that's in the back growing. We have some rosemary, and then you can see the sage that's in that back corner. Right, so this is an outdoor growing space if you wanted to plant directly into the ground. But then, like I was saying, you can also plant into containers. So in the picture that we have on the left, this is actually basil that we're growing in a plastic container. This is actually a deep container. It doesn't need to be so deep. But as you can see here, we have a few different basil plants growing in there, probably about 6. Basil grows up and it also grows out. So when we started this little blue container, all the plants were really small. We just kept watering it, and then it grew really large. And now we're able to harvest that basil to sell at our farm stand. One of our staff members likes to make pesto, so she has all the basil that she needs to make pesto for the rest of the summer. And then if you look to the picture to the right, there in the barrel to the right, we have some collard greens growing, and in the barrel to the left, we have some kale that's growing. Right, so all we did was start with 1 or 2 plants in these barrels. We probably started them about 4 or 5 weeks ago, and then up to this point, they've grown pretty abundant. So then if we wanted to harvest these things, right, this is a meal for more than one person, right? This is a family-sized meal, if not a couple of families worth of greens that we have growing in this container right here. And the great thing about these leaf vegetables here is that once you harvest it, the leaves will, or the plant will continue to produce, right? So we'll take a couple leaves off, and the plant will produce more leaves that we can continue to harvest through the remainder of the summer. So now, right, if this were in my backyard, I really wouldn't need to buy collard greens for the rest of the summer because I have all the collard greens that I would need just in this little barrel here. And the same thing for the kale. So this is really great because you can supplement your grocery order or completely eliminate certain trips to the grocery store just by growing in these 2 containers in your backyard or these 3 containers depending on how much space that you have. Right, and then like I was saying, if you don't have outdoor space, you are also able to grow things indoors. Most indoor things, we probably will stick to herbs because they are able to take a lot better indoors. They're able to deal with a lot less low levels of sunlight that we would get through a kitchen window or another apartment or house window like that. But right, we can grow most herbs indoors also, right? So in the picture on the right, you see mint, chives, oregano, rosemary, basil. On the picture on the left, we have some of the same things. And all you need is little pots, right? Nothing super large, like in these other 2 pictures, right? All you need is these little pots. And then as you're cooking, right, you can just go over right to your windowsill at the time with your kitchen scissors, cut that off, and then incorporate these fresh dishes right into whatever you're cooking at the time. All right, so like I was saying at the beginning, this is a real easy way to eliminate trips to the grocery store and to incorporate fresh foods that you look at from the grocery store right into your meals right at the time. Things that you've grown yourself, right? These are things that you know haven't been sprayed with any pesticides to get rid of bugs, haven't been sprayed with any chemical fertilizers, right? Because maybe you don't want to use those things. There are no other fungicides or things like that sprayed, right? And that's really important because those things have lasting impacts onto our bodies. So by taking control of the things that you're growing directly in your house or directly in your backyard, and then having that go from your windowsill directly into your food, now you can rest assured that you're not putting any other harmful chemicals or things that may lead to cancers or other things into your body because you've now taken control very easily of the things that are going into your meals. And then a lot of these things just taste a lot better because they're fresher, right? They haven't been dried out and stored for a long time. They're not traveling from the farm states away, hundreds of miles away, right? They're things that came right from the soil that's right in your home, taste really fresh, and it really can't get any better than that. And then here's a list of really easy herbs that you can grow on your windowsill in your house. Right, so these are things like basil, chives, mint, oregano, parsley, rosemary, thyme. And the great things about these is that they're things that you can really easily grow from seed. So just so you know, Grid and North Conservancy gives out free seeds to Newark residents, really residents of any city as long as you're willing to drive to get it. But for Newark residents, we can deliver these things out to you. So if you want these seeds to grow right in your own windowsill, let me know and I can get those to you. But these are things that can grow really easily from seed, or they're things that you can buy from the supermarket and then plant them and they actually will grow on their own, right? So you can buy fresh mint from the supermarket and you can actually pot up that mint in a container in your own home, and then that mint will send out new shoots, and then you can actually continue harvesting that mint from that plant that you have grown from or that you have bought from the supermarket. So if you don't want to start these things out from seed, if you kind of want to bypass that process, actually a lot of these herbs take really well to being potted directly from the supermarket into pots that you have in your own home, right? And these are pots that are really cheap, right? Just little plastic 6-inch pot, for example. So to go back to those 4 keys, the 4 things that you need to consider when you're vegetable gardening are water, right? Do you have a constant access to water that isn't too far away, that's not going to be annoying to get to, right? And then thinking about how often are you going to water your plant, making sure that you're not overwatering or underwatering, making sure that you're giving it just enough water for it to survive. The second thing is light, making sure that it can get enough sunlight that it needs, preferably 6 to 8 hours of sunlight a day, either from a windowsill or out in the backyard in order for it to grow. Making sure that you have healthy soils that are free of any toxins and that also have the nutrients that your plants need to survive. So remember, you may couple that with composting things like kitchen scraps. So those are coffee grounds. Those can be banana peels, apple peels, the stems from your collard greens, any other food that, you know, haven't been processed with oils and things like that, right? Just fresh foods that come straight from the ground that you're not going to use, that you can just put into your soil so that the plant can recycle those nutrients. And then the last thing you want to consider is growing space. So it's going to be outside in the ground, outside in a container, or indoors in a pot. And then, all these 4 keys are interconnected, right? So depending if you're growing outside in the ground versus indoors in a container, that will impact the amount of water that you need, right? That will impact the amount of light that your plant will have access to. So always keep these 4 keys in mind in relation to each other. And that's why we give these 4 keys, because if you kind of think about these 4 things and how they all relate to one another, essentially you've thought through the hard steps of gardening, and then all you have to do is plant your seeds and then actually get to gardening, which is not the hard part, right? Gardening is mostly just watering, watching, making sure that things are growing well. These 4 things here are the main things that you have to think about when you're planning out your garden and making sure that you're putting it in the appropriate space in order for you to actually get the bounty that you're hoping to get by doing this. So here's some resources for gardening in Newark, if you're interested. So here's my contact information. Like I said, I'm from Greater Newark Conservancy. Here's my email and phone number. And like I was saying, Greater Newark Conservancy, we give away free seeds. So these are vegetable seeds and these are herb seeds. So if you're interested, just send me an email and then I can set you up with either mailing you free seeds. If you're going to come down to our site to see how we're doing things here, I can, set you up with that also. And we also give free advice. So if you have a vegetable garden that you have at your own house, or if you're really interested in starting, but you don't know how, reach out to us. And then I can help get you started, either by going over those 4 keys again and helping you walk through each of them to make sure you plan it out, or by giving you other advice with what are the things that you may actually want to start, right? So in terms of your diet, do you eat a lot of collard greens? Do you eat a lot of kale? What herbs do you use the most? To make sure that in the limited space that you have available to you, that you're growing the things that are actually going to make the biggest impact either on your diet or on your budget, because you can grow those things and then not have to go to the supermarket instead. I also have the contact information for Natalie Augusto-Filion from the Newark Office of Sustainability. So if you're interested in gardening inside your house, but especially outside your house, Natalie has a lot of resources that the city is able to offer, either through different grants or other services that homeowners or other residents are able to have access to because they are Newark residents. So she's just a great person to contact. If you have any questions about gardening, any questions about anything green or sustainable in the city of Newark, she would be the person to reach out to with that. Her office is very much connected with other city offices. So maybe if the city of Newark can't get something, or if you know somebody who lives in a surrounding city, Natalie will be able to connect you or that person to whatever resources may be necessary for you. And then finally, I'll put the contact information for the program coordinator of the City of Newark's Adopt a Lot program. So if you're unaware of this, the Adopt a Lot program has been going on for a few years. So essentially what this is the city, in order to not have to maintain vacant lots, they can become overcrowded with weeds or people can start to throw trash in them. In order to kind of get that off of the city's plate and to get it more in the hands of community members, the city offers a program called Adopt a Lot, where they will lease out a vacant lot to community members for $1 a year. Ms. Harrow's contact information is here, where she can, help you identify a lot in your neighborhood that may be there, may be overgrown, and if you and a couple of other members of your community would like to adopt that lot, maybe put a garden there, maybe put, if it's not a garden, maybe just a community space, she can help you identify those lots, and then for $1 a year, you can have access to that space and you can maintain it. And then these leases are renewable, so you may be able to have that lease for a few years, have that space for a few years. And then at the Conservancy, we also like to support these Adopt a Lot leasers. So we used to have a program where for $15 a year, we would set people up with, seeds again, free advice. We will give you some tools to help out. We've kind of phased that program out, but if you are interested, we can set you up. Like I said, we love to give free advice. We love to connect people with these resources. So if you are interested, you do adopt a lot, let us know, because we can be able to set you up with things that the City of Newark may not have access to or may not be able to provide you at the time. So, take down these contacts and then, set yourself up for success as you begin your gardening endeavor. So then going back to where we started, why do you want a vegetable garden, right? One of the main things is that you want to be able to grow your own food, right? Know what's going into your body, maybe cut down on costs at the supermarket because you can grow a lot of the things that are available at the supermarket. And the great thing about it is that you grow it yourself, so you know that it's not traveling from hundreds of miles away So you know that maybe they aren't spraying things on it that will help it survive that journey from California or that journey from Maine. You know that they aren't spraying pesticides or things on it because you're the one growing it. So if you want to use organic practices, if you want to know all the things that are going into your body and make sure that it's 100% natural, 100% good for you, then growing it yourself is the best way to know that. And then there's the therapeutic aspect where you have control over something, or you're able to nurture something, you're able to get that end result of something that you put your hard work into, and then you're then able to share with your family, your friends, yourself. And then you're able to, take time to reflect with something that is very not super labor intensive, but, it's something that's intentional, something that you can go on from day to day. Maybe you wake up every morning and right, that you check on your vegetables, you make sure to water and weed. So it's something that you can build into your daily schedule, but not something that's super taxing or something that will, take up too much time as you're attempting to work with that. And now, if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask. I've seen some things popping through in the chat box.
Yes, I did. I wrote some of them down for us, Malcolm.
Thank you.
Let's try to address, do you use special soil for herbs?
No, so the soils that you use for herbs, you really can use for your other vegetables and things too. So you can buy these things from Home Depot or Lowe's. So, these are like potting soils, for example. If you want to grow something in the ground, there may be a different soil that you want to use, but those things are widely available from Home Depot and Lowe's. And at the Conservancy, we're also trying to make those things available. The only thing with that is that soil, we just want to make sure that you're getting a high quality soil, right? So there are a lot of people who will donate soils, kind of like topsoils and things like that. But like we're saying, we want to promote organic gardening, things that are healthy. So we're trying to identify sources that are giving soil out that don't have any other chemicals or any other toxins. So I can, keep an eye out for the Conservancy, because if we were to provide that, it would be for very cheaply or free. So, keep an eye out for that if you are interested.
Thank you, Malcolm. I have time for one more. And this person said, can a window garden work as an intro to gardening?
Yeah, definitely. So I'll go back to one of my previous slides. So this top picture here is something that you can buy. Essentially, it's like a little hydroponic or aeroponic system where essentially you can fill it up with water. It has a UV light, so it does all the work that it needs for you, right? All you have to do is put the seed in there, put the plant in there, and you watch it grow. You may need to refill the water basin every once in a while, but that's a very low-stakes way for you to get started growing out. And then, you can just work your way up from there. So maybe you start out with this automated system, and then you move to pots where you're actually the one that has to make or has to think about when you have to water, like the frequency of watering, or you have to think about, right, how crowded do you want the space to be. So yeah, a windowsill is the perfect place to start. And then, you can just work your way up from there. So maybe you started from windowsill, you can go to your backyard in a container, for example. You can also buy other, like grow lights is what they're called. So these are UV lights. So if you don't have access to a windowsill that gets like constant sunlight, you can actually buy lights that will essentially mimic the sunlight. It will give the plant all it needs in order to grow in terms of light requirements, and it's really easy to work with.
Okay. I want to share a comment. Someone said, I'm growing basil and mint. The mint is completely out of control, but we love it. The gardens in your presentation are beautiful, and I also like the herbs in the jars. And the last one that we have time to address, I currently have artillery fungus. Can I grow plants in that soil?
I would say if you could replace the soil, that would be great. I'm not super sure about artillery fungus. So there are actually some fungi that are beneficial to plants or to specific plants. So I'll have to look more into it. But look it up and see for whatever you're growing, is that fungus something that is detrimental to whatever you're growing? If it is, then I'll say replace the soil. Sometimes you have to do that, just replace the soil out and start all over. And also just the mint comment. If people are interested in growing mint, I'll say be very careful. If you want to plant it in your garden, it's best, we recommend to grow mint in a container because mint kind of have its own designated space, because mint is very, very, very invasive. And once you plant it in one area, it will try to get to whatever other area in your garden that you can. So if you like that, then that is great and power to you. If you do want mint, and you don't want it to take over, then try to put it in a container as often as possible, and then it will take up as much space in that container that it can.
All right, very last question from our fitness instructor, Crystal. Can I grow basil in this size pot? Well, I don't know what this size is, so.
Most sizes you could get away with. Like if you have like a little pot that's like this size, you know, just a standard like plastic pot or clay pot, basil can grow in that, right? You won't get like a super large plant, right? So the larger the pot is or the container is, the more the plant will kind of sprout out, the more you can put in there and the more you can get from it, right? But if it's like, hey, I know that I like to use a basil leaf or two with this particular meal, then a pot that's that size will suit your needs. But with herbs are really great because they really will adapt to whatever size container you want to work with. For other things like other vegetables, then you have to really worry about pot size. Like for greens, for example, you want a wider pot, but luckily the pot doesn't need to be that shallow. So maybe you want a pot that's like at least 3 or 4 inches deep, and that would be sufficient for certain greens. If you're going to grow things like potatoes or garlic or things like that, you need a pot that's a little bit deeper since those things grow into the ground, a little bit wider. So I'll say if you're interested in container gardening, look up container gardening because there are a ton of resources, just like with all gardening. There are a ton of resources online, on YouTube. People get you started with that. Just be willing to take the first step of, you know, looking it up, planting your seed, and you'll be successful. As long as you know, are interested and willing to look up more information, there's so much that you can get from it, and there's so many benefits.
Well, Malcolm, I'm glad that you're keeping the resource page up because I'm certain you're going to get many requests for those mint, the chives, the oregano, the thyme, all of those things. This has been incredibly insightful. Some of our colleagues and some of our guests and some of the people have chatted. They're ready to start a garden. Ms. Brenda Hopper is ready to start her garden. Lenore, she's ready to start her garden. So you've motivated many folks to do this. So we want to thank you for taking the time to do this. Again, we learned so many things that we didn't even know existed. $1 a year to get some therapy. Listen, you can't even get a counselor for that price, right? So this is awesome. So thank you and your team at the Greater Newark Conservancy. I want to encourage everyone on our chat here today and on our group to please visit the Greater Newark Conservancy website. Go get those free seeds. Go get the free advice. Because next year, this time, you can show us your gardens.
Exactly. And then really quickly, I wish I had a flyer up here. We have a farm stand that we do in Newark. If you go on our website, you can find our farm stand flyer. But 4 days a week, we sell herbs that we grow. We sell vegetables that we grow. You can get your collards, your kale. You get all organically managed things. So go on our website, you can get more information, and things are really cheap, right? We'll sell our greens for $1.50 a bundle, right? We'll sell our...
Call Malcolm at 624-4646, extension 33, because he answers the phone. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes our session. Again, Malcolm, thank you. We thank you all. As a reminder, please fill out the surveys. Malcolm is going to be excited to hear the reviews, so please be so kind as to fill out the surveys. Have a wonderful weekend. Be safe, be healthy, and don't forget, wear your mask. All right. Goodbye, all.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.